Okay, we are about to get in volume 13, everybody. Let's go! Prologue. Ferdinand, I think it's about time you told me what happened over the past 2 years, Rosamund said with a firm look when the man in question arrived at the High Bishop's chambers. She was clean and well-dressed, no longer covered in the derive. Her tone was bright and there was a liveliness in her golden eyes, but her muscles had atrophied so much over the past 2 years of sleep that they could no longer support her, so she was lying limply on a bench, completely immobile. Not a single person in recorded Ehrenfest history had slept in a derive for such a long time, so she would no doubt be a valuable research subject when it came to analyzing the effects of using one for such an extensive period. Rosamund noticed Ferdinand falling into thought after glancing down at her. Well, she said, just barely managing to tap an impatient finger against the table, are we going to talk or not? There is much we cannot discuss here. May we move to the hidden room? Not even in the temple could one carelessly discuss what had happened in the castle. Or rather than confirming the request with a nod, Rosamund simply closed her eyes. I don't mind going to the hidden room, but I can't exactly walk. A fair point. Have you felt any changes since waking up? Are you slowly regaining the ability to move certain parts of your body? Can you say how closer you are to being as mobile as you used to be, preferably in the form of an estimated percentage? Hey, quit asking her those questions. As Ferdinand started listing off every question that came to mind, Rosamund gave a smile so bright that it was blatantly fake. You really are a mad scientist, she said. Ferdinand didn't know what a mad scientist was, but he could tell it was an insult of some sort. Without a word, he flicked her on the forehead. Ouchie, she cried out as she usually would, but she couldn't help it reflexively rub her head. Her movements were too sluggish. It took her some time just to even raise a hand. If she is in this state now, just how long will it take for her muscles to recover enough for her to move normally? What needs to be done? She will ideally return to her usual self soon, but is it possible the process will take too long for her to attend the Royal Academy in time? Ferdinand silently opened the door to the hidden room, pondering what medicine and magic tools could be used to get Rosamund out of the situation. Fran and Dom carried her inside on the bench, then promptly exited it and closed the door behind them. The moment they were gone, Rosamund's expression morphed into an unhappy frown. Just so you know, Ferdinand, I really feel like Urashima Taro right now. Who or what is that? I do not understand your words. You were the first person I saw when I woke up, but you look exactly the same as you always do. Down to the creases beneath your brows, so it didn't really hit me that 2 years had actually passed. But Nicola and Monica are both of age now. They have their hair up, their skirts are long, and even Gail's super tall now, so... Both Wilfred and Charlotte had left her behind as well. Ferdinand was well aware of this, but he chose to remain silent. Given that Rosamund had worked almost foolishly hard to be an excellent and respectable big sister, he didn't even want to imagine how she would react to learning that her little sister was now taller than her. I suppose I will need to face the aftermath eventually, though. Ferdinand let out a heavy sigh, then immediately realized Rosamund's mana was likely wavering. Her voice became increasingly distraught, and her worried eyes shifted in color from their familiar gold to a violently shifting rainbow. Rosamund! Calm down. Everyone's left me behind. I'm in a whole new world and I don't know anything. It feels so terrible, so scary. Rosamund, calm yourself. I can't. Everyone is different now. Everyone but me. That is not true. Your mana flow has changed over the past 2 years, but you're going to lose control over it if you do not compose yourself. Ferdinand could already see Rosamund's mana stirring. Having expected this, he took out a face stone from his back hip pouch and pressed it against her forehead. It was filled with mana in the blink of an eye, as was the next he pulled out and the next. Rosamund gasped and opened her eyes. She blinked several times and inhaled deeply to catch her breath. Only once her emotions were under control did she weakly stretch out a shaking hand to grip Ferdinand's sleeve, just as she had done upon waking in the derive. Ferdinand, please tell me what happened over the past 2 years. Everyone is so different now that I'm scared to even go outside. That's quite a broad subject. Where am I to begin? Did you catch the kidnappers? Is Charlotte safe? Well, yeah, of course you want to know exactly that first. The kidnapping incident had ended 2 years ago for Ferdinand, but for Rosamund, it had essentially taken place yesterday. Only now did this thought occur to him. It seemed filling in the 2 years of missing experience will press harder than he expected. Charlotte's kidnapper was revealed to be a member of Rosemary's family. He has already been executed, though he denied involvement in your kidnapping and the poisoning. Viscount Gerlach drew much suspicion for having previously owned the devouring soldiers used in the operation, but there was no evidence against him. He was confirmed to have been inside the sealed Grand Hall when the attack was brought to our attention. It was concluded that the guard knights had not acted improperly, but for failing to protect their charges, they were punished with decreased salaries. I'm glad that was their only punishment. What happened with the Witcher playroom? Wilfred and Charlotte both did their best to lead using the instructions in your letters according to the attendants there. Daniel confirmed this as well, having been tasked with bringing books to the castle and lending them out. It seems the two also received much assistance from a lay noble by the name of Feline. The lay noble apparently idolized Rosamund, and her efforts were often brought up by Daniel, Wilfred, and Charlotte. It seemed that Rosamund recognized the name, as her worried expression instantly gave way to a slight smile. I see, Feline did all that for us? She wrote a lot of stories, didn't she? I believe so. The stories from the playroom were all written in the colloquial speech of children, however, and your attendants bemoaned that they could not be turned into proper books. In the end, they were somewhat useless, Ferdinand said, recalling the struggle that Fran and Gil had endured. Rosamund let out a giggle, then looked up in realization. What happened with Haas? Was spring prayer carried out okay? Charlotte performs Haas's spring prayer in your place, determined to fill the hole you left behind, Ferdinand explained. It would have been more accurate to say that he had ordered her to perform it, but it wasn't untrue that she had wished to compensate for her big sister's absence. Did Charlotte have enough mana for that? Rosamund asked, a worried look on her face. Of course not, Ferdinand scoffed. She used the mana that had been dissolved in your Dreve. She and Wilfred performed the Harvest Festival and this year's spring prayer in your place as well, so be sure to thank them. They have grown used to working with face stones. That's good to hear. They've sure grown up a lot, huh? Rosamund whispered sadly, lowering her eyes. Ferdinand didn't know how to console her. The only words he could offer were a blunt, naturally, 2 years have passed. Right. Well, what about the lower city? I bet Dad and the others were really worried about me being asleep for 2 years. This time, it was Ferdinand who lowered his eyes. Her family treasured their bond even after the walls of status had torn them apart. He could imagine they had been even more worried about her than he had, since they were not able to check up on her frequently as he was. I do not receive reports on the status of your family, he said. My only information regarding the lower city is that the hand pumps have successfully begun to proliferate. Perhaps your attendants in charge of the workshop can give you the answers you need. I'll ask Gil and Fran later. Did the printing industry freeze without me? How did the paper making in Ilgner go? Things were going so well, too. Rosamund was making herself depressed before she had even received an answer, so Ferdinand graciously told her what had actually happened in Ilgner. What? Volka's having a child? I'm so glad he's found Yay! They're actually having a kid! That's great! Upon receiving an update in the Harvest Festival, Rosamund rejoiced as though she had found happiness herself. Ferdinand was endlessly baffled by her capacity to empathize with others. And lack of thereof for you, dude. But then again, considering what he had gone through with Veronica, of course all that's been shut up. As for the printing industry, Elvira refused to allow its stagnation, taking the initiative to stabilize printing workshops within her home province of Haldensale. The Gutenbergs were all mobilized for this purpose, leaving for the province in spring and returning following the Harvest Festival. Benno gave me his report on the matter just recently. What? Mother got involved with the printing industry, Rosamund asked, her eyes widening with surprise. Ferdinand gave a firm nod. He had already been overwhelmed with work, so Elvira had willfully taken his place, absolutely dedicating herself to leading the industry her daughter had started. As an archnoble, she was not very informed on the business practices of commoners, so her unreasonable demands certainly put Benno through the ringer, but Ferdinand appreciated the relief somewhat. Nonetheless. You owe much to Elvira's motherly love, he said. I am grateful to her, but... Rosamund trailed off uncomfortably, looking up at Ferdinand with a hard-to-read expression. There was a pause as she struggled to find the right words, then she closed her eyes and murmured, I'm surprised you gave her your permission. In all honesty, I did not have the time to personally involve myself with the printing industry. It was such a great boon that Elvira elected to handle it all for me. That makes sense. All my work did go to you, after all. You've done well. I'll ask Gil and the planting company about the printing industry later on, so... Has the former Veronica faction called down yet? Rosamund had given Ferdinand praise, and then changed the topic as though it were the most natural thing in the world. She hadn't criticized him for entrusting some of his work to someone else, and it was perhaps due to this consideration that he then allowed himself to show a kind of vulnerability he would never dare show to anyone else. The former Veronica faction has shown no signs of mobilizing. Viscount Gerlach has been deftly avoiding our attempts to prove his wrongdoings, and while I was told to trap and extract information from him, or evidence from him, I was so busy with the work in front of me. As such, I have not captured the one who kidnapped you. Forgive me. Rosamund's workload was immense, far more than one would expect a child to have. It had proven too much for Ferdinand to shoulder alone, and so he had needed to seek much assistance from others. Her temple work alone was a heavy burden, but she was also involved with ceremonies, the orphanage, the workshops, and the planting company. All that, combined with him no longer having her services as a calculator, nor her guarding against the castle exploiting his labor, meant the dam holding back the water had finally burst. Ferdinand had been summoned to the castle more frequently, where he would receive unreasonable demands from both Sylvester and Bonifacius, the latter in particular constantly demanding that he put into action some scheme or another to capture Viscount Gerlach, and that he do something to wake Rosamund as soon as possible. Perhaps I would have been able to capture Gerlach by now had Bonifacius not been so invigorated. Eckert had initially helped Ferdinand as his assistant, Daniel had worked in place of his charge, and Bridget had provided her assistance where possible, but all three were abruptly snatched away by Bonifacius to engage in a brutal training regimen. Had Ferdinand kept him by his side, perhaps he would have been had more options for trapping Viscount Gerlach. He had few retainers he could trust, however, and with Viscount Gerlach being more extra cautious ever since he was summoned for questioning, Ferdinand lacked the leeway to properly lay out a trap to gather evidence from him. We were able to block Georgine's return, and we are currently working to prevent any official interactions between Ehrenbach and Ehrenfest, which I imagine is leaving them unable to make any moves. Lampert, however, is a cause for concern in this regard. There is a chance he may sow the seeds of conflict. Lampert, my brother? Huh? Ferdinand furrowed his brow as he thought back to what had happened over the past 2 years. At the end of the winter, you fell into your long slumber. Lampert attended the Royal Academy's graduation ceremony to celebrate his lover's graduation. He had possessed less mana than her while he was at the Academy, as her father had been reluctant to bless their relationship, but your mana compression method had resulted in his capacity increasing a little over the winter. And that was enough for her father to accept their marriage? Yes, he was told that his mana continuing to grow would be enough. As such, when Lampert returns from the Royal Academy, he asked Sylvester and Cardstaff for permission to marry her. Rosamund nodded excitedly and gestured for Ferdinand to continue, her eyes glittering with hope. Ferdinand truly did not understand why women were so enthralled with the romance of others. It's because we have none of our own. And it's always nice to see. He sighed, then continued, she certainly wasn't going to like how it ended. However, as his lover is an Ehrenbach archnoble, his request was denied on the spot. He knew ahead of time that they would reject him based on recent Ehrenfest politics, so after an unsurprised nod, he sent a farewell letter to his lover. No matter how much a couple wanted to marry, it could never happen without their parents' approval and the Archduke's permission. They were allowed to have personal relationships based on feelings up until their graduation, but after that, society ruthlessly clamped down onto them. It wasn't rare for marriages between nobles to contain no love whatsoever. Lampert is Wilfred's guard knight, I suppose. It would be problematic for him to marry a high-status Ehrenbach girl, Rosamund said. Her brow was furrowed slightly, but her tone made it clear that she understood the situation. Under normal circumstances, a situation such as this would have ended with the farewell letter. Lampert's lover, however, is the niece of an archnoble, and during last year's spring Archduke conference, Ehrenfest demanded to know why Sylvester had refused to permit the marriage. Yikes. After being accosted at the Archduke conference, Sylvester had managed to fend off Ehrenbach with as many excuses as he could muster. For one, there were nobles other than Lampert who wanted to marry Ehrenbach girls, but with so few nobles at the moment, no archduke would want to allow their archnoble woman to go to other duchies instead of producing powerful children for their home duchy. Ehrenfest was also weaker than Ehrenbach, so no matter how much Sylvester wanted to allow the two to be together, he couldn't afford to lose a powerful archnoble by allowing him to marry into another duchy, nor could he permit Lampert to marry while denying others with similar ambitions. So essentially he can't do favoritism in this, which sucks. It is expected he will again be accosted during this year's Archduke conference, Ferdinand continued, so you will need to learn what you can about the current state of Ehrenbach and Ehrenbach politics after entering the Royal Academy. Well, I'll do what I can, I guess. Rosamund's blatant lack of interest prompted Ferdinand to rub his forehead. Were you listening to a word of what I just told you? Yes, but since Lampert's marriage is guaranteed to fail for political reasons, I'm a lot more interested in what happened between Bridget and Daniel. You are more interested in a marriage between your guard knights than the marriage of your own brother? Absolutely, I've spent a lot more time with them than I have with Lamprey, and besides, he doesn't even know the Lamprey's girl, so of course he's not going to be as interested. Ferdinand sharply inhaled at her unexpected reply. She had shown such devotion to Wilfrid and Charlotte that he had assumed she treasured anyone who was legally her family. But as it turned out, it wasn't blood or technicality that determined her attachment to someone, but the amount of time she had spent with them. This was his first time realizing that she clearly delineated between those who were her family and those who weren't, which he hadn't expected from the girl who treated everyone with such consideration that her family seemed to grow by the day. Ferdinand, what happened with Daniel and Bridget? I am sorry to disappoint you, but they did not end up marrying one another. Why not? Rosamund exclaimed, her eyes wide with shock. Didn't they both love each other? Isn't there any introductory politics at play here either? There aren't any introductory politics at play either, but sort of. Ferdinand was equally surprised, not because the marriage hadn't worked out, but because she had truly believed there was a chance it would actually happen. Their hopes and dreams simply were not aligned. There was nothing that could be done. Mutual love isn't enough for things to go well, huh? There are countless things that depend on outside circumstances, or they're not. Surely you understand this, having come of age once before in a past life. I read about it in a lot of books, but well, I'd never actually met a couple who didn't have a good relationship after mutually falling in love. This was enough for Ferdinand to realize that the world Rosamund came from was only deceptively similar to his. There were many substantial differences, and he could guess that there were the way people perceived marriage was among them. There were two possible paths they could have taken to make their marriage a reality. One was for Bridget, the little sister of a landowning men noble, to descend to the rank of a lay noble and live in the noble's quarter. The other was for Daniel, the second son of a lay noble, to become a men noble through marriage. Well, what's the problem with Daniel becoming a men noble? Surely that's an improvement for him, Rosamund said casually, which revealed just how little she knew about nobles. Of course. She knows a lot, yet she doesn't at the same time. That would require Daniel to step down from serving as your guard knight and move to Ilgner. While that would be acceptable for an average lay knight, his position is rather unique. Not only does he owe both his position and his life to your kindness, he knows too much about you to be safely let go, Ferdinand explained. For obvious reasons, neither the public nor Bridget knew Daniel possessed information about Rosamund's time as a commoner. Can't I just give him my permission to quit? Like, right now? Could they get married then? Well, it's too late for that. Elvira introduced Bridget to a new man to whom she got married this summer. She has now returned to Ilgner. That happened way too fast. I can't believe it. She had been more than ready to release Daniel and send him to Ilgner despite everything he knew about her, all to ensure that their relationship worked out. Ferdinand had no choice but to respectfully applaud Elvira, who had sensed this danger and swiftly prevented it from happening before Rosamund could wake up. Smart woman. Ferdinand had no intention of telling Rosamund this, since she was so emotionally weak when it came to matters of death, but had Daniel chosen to go to Ilgner, he would have experienced a sudden and mysterious demise by the end of the month. Keeping such critical information about the Archducal family private was more important to Ehrenfest than the life of a single lay noble. Speaking of which, your personal chef requested permission to get married. Ferdinand added. Those arrangements could also not be made while you were asleep. They are still awaiting an answer, so I would rather you settle this matter than dwell on the past. I guess Hugo's spring has finally come, Rosamund said, feebly attempting to smile. I'm happy for him. Despite her words, the expression on her face was the same one she had worn when voicing her fears about how much everyone had changed. I imagine your attendants will know more about the orphanage and workshop than I do. It would be best for you to ask them any further questions. Right. Noticing the anxiety in Rosamund's stiff expression, Ferdinand paused in thought, wondering what he should do to ease her concerns. He knew many people who had used a Jereve before, but they had slept from 10 days at the least to a season at most. Someone remaining asleep for 2 whole years was simply unheard of. And more than anything else, he had been watching her so closely over the years, so desperately praying for some kind of change that he could not quite empathize with her feelings of worry over the changes she saw. Rather, he felt more empathy for her attendants and relatives who had spent the past 2 years worrying themselves to death over when she would wake up, or whether she would wake up at all. Rosamund, I do not know what you are afraid of, but all of your attendants have been waiting for you to awaken. They followed the instructions you left behind and managed your chambers, the orphanage, and the workshop to your absence. They dedicated themselves to making new books and doing whatever work they could to ensure your happiness when you returned. You should not fear their growth, but rather celebrate it. You're right, Rosamund replied enthusiastically. A big smile now spread across her face. It was the same expression she always wore, and it was for precisely that reason that Ferdinand let out a long sigh of relief. Just call me Urashima Taro. I'm assuming that's like shoot. What was the name of the story? Of the guy who fell asleep under a tree and woke up like 50 years in the future or something, and it was an old man. I can't remember what the guy's name was. It was something that we all know. I can't remember what the name of it is. I came out of the dream feeling entirely like Urashima Taro, a man from Japanese folklore who went to the undersea dragon palace for a few days only to discover that 100 years had passed when he returned. Ferdinand hadn't changed in the slightest, so I had barely even felt the passage of time at first. In fact, I had mainly just been upset about not getting to experience being 9 years old. Once he carried me out of the room, I saw that Nicola and Monica had come of age. Their hair was up, they wore long skirts, and their chests were bigger. Gil must have gone through puberty as well, because despite being only up to Fran's chest in my memories, he now stood far above Fran's shoulders. Good lord, dude! That's a growth spurt! Big time! His voice was also so deep that he sounded like someone else entirely. Those 2 years of sleep were like a single night to me, so waking up to find everyone having grown up so much is equal parts weird and terrifying. Oh my god, I can't wait to see that in the anime. That's gonna be awesome. Wonder what they'll pick for his voice. I can't wait to see that. I alone was the same as always. In fact, I was arguably in a worse position than before because my muscles had atrophied so much that I couldn't even move properly. I was basically paralyzed at the complete mercy of those I technically knew but didn't recognize as they stripped off my clothes and bathed me. While I was scared and nervous beyond words, I couldn't ask them to stop or say I would handle things myself. I desperately tried flapping my mouth, moving my legs, and opening my hands. Slowly but surely, I got used to moving my immobile body, plastering a smile on my face all the while to hide the fear dominating my heart. Ferdinand gave me a concise version of the events that had occurred while I was asleep, and hearing about how much everyone had worried about me had eased my nerves a little. But now, with the unstoppable flow of time being thrust right in my face, it felt as though there was no obstacle in front of me that could never be surmounted. I needed to get my life back in control as soon as possible so that I could get to work adjusting to this new time period. I'll get things back to normal starting tomorrow, Anne asked. If something can be done about my body, that is. Ferdinand abruptly stood up as though my words had reminded him of something. I wish to fetch a magic tool. Would you prefer to wait here or come outside of me? I'll wait here. Could you hand me one of those books before you go, I asked, pointing with my eyes to the stack that Gil had made while I was asleep. Ferdinand picked up the top book, set it on my stomach, then turned around and left. A new book! Yay! After pumping myself up, I slowly moved my hands to touch it, the sensation of a new book having bringing a broad smile to my face. Oh no, is she going to drop it? I tried to open it with my weakly shaking hand, but it was harder than I anticipated. Even gripping and turning a page was an immense challenge. I couldn't properly support the book as I tried to open it either, so I ended up sliding off my stomach and onto the floor. No, she can't reach it. And wait, whose room is she in? Is she in Ferdinand's hidden room or her hidden room? Because if it's her hidden room, oh wait, nobody can come in. Pooh. Well, poo. The only people who could come in is if she was in her orphanage director's chamber's hidden room, because then they could. And thudding onto the floor. Despite my best efforts to pick it back up, my arm just practically hung off the bench, too heavy for me to raise with my own strength. No way could I retrieve the book when I couldn't even raise my arm. Can't believe I'm so weak that I can't even read a book. Even after sacrificing a whole 2 years of my life, I didn't feel the slightest bit healthier than before. Well, I mean, your body has atrophied because you weren't using your body. It was using all the energy to heal. So of course your muscles are you're gonna have to use physical therapy or some kind of magic tool to get yourself back on track. And even then, I think you only have a month to the Royal Academy, so you only have a month, dude. You're gonna be worked to the bone. In fact, everything was worse. My body hadn't grown, my muscles had atrophied, and I had even more mana. What was the point in forcing a smile onto my face? The remaining strength drained me in an instant, and tears started to well up in my eyes. I am back, Ferdinand announced. Why are you crying? I can't even read books. My hands don't. I can't turn the pages. I hate this. Well, I can understand you hating this. I mean, you can't even move your hands, really. Ferdinand sighed, then grabbed my left hand and stuck some fancy bracelet-looking thing around my upper arm. It stuck in place like a magic ring, clinging to my skin before starting to suck up my mana. Ferdinand, what? I can't move my arm. These are magic tools for reinforcing enhancement magic. I used them in the past in order to grasp the fundamental techniques of physically enhancing oneself with mana. This should be perfect for you since you are presently overflowing with excess mana. I expect that they will allow you to move normally. Hold out your other arm. He stuck out a second bracelet around my other arm, and with that I could move my entire upper body with ease. It was incredible. I spun my arms around experimentally. Hey, now I can read books. Could you please get excited over something else for once? But why? I'm more moved and grateful right now than I've ever been in my life. Ferdinand shook his head, appearing to have immediately given up on the matter, then held out 2 more bracelets. Attach these to your legs later on, he said. I took them from him and tilted my head. Why aren't we putting them on now? They require contact with skin to function. Do you intend to expose your bare legs to me? I cannot say I am fond of such immodesty. Oh my god, y'all with your freaking craziness when it comes to modesty. It makes me think of, the Amish? I think, like that when it comes to modesty, the adults wear long skirts and they wear their hair up. I mean, it makes me think of that. It does not concern me if you are an exhibitionist, but at the very least, I will ask that you satisfy such urges somewhere I am not present. I would rather not be mistaken for one of your kind. Hey! You do realize she has freaking clothes on, dude. All she has to do is just move her clothes up a little bit, tiny bit, to get it on her skin. I was currently wearing socks that were attached by string to a belt around my waist, like a crudely made garter without a hint of sexiness, beneath a pair of old-fashioned drawers. In other words, for the leg bracelet to touch my skin, I would need to remove my underwear and have them clasped around my thighs. Given that I couldn't move my legs on my own right now, asking Ferdinand to put the bracelets on me was akin to me asking him to take off my underwear. Yeah, not a good idea! Excuse me? I'm no exhibitionist. I just assumed that you could put them around my ankles or something. It's your fault for not explaining that they need to touch the skin, Ferdinand. Now go call Monica and Nicola so they can put them on me. Ferdinand exited the hidden room with Monica and Nicola arriving a moment later to take his place. They removed my clothes and secured the bracelets around my thighs. I tried swinging my legs around, and much to my excitement, they moved just fine. The 2 girls widened their eyes in surprise at my once drooping limbs suddenly becoming so mobile. Ferdinand allowed me to borrow them to help me move again, I explained. Could you lend me your hands? I want to try standing up. Of course. I put some strength into my legs and managed to stand up just as I had wanted to. I slowly let go of their hands, walked a lap around the room with my own, then struck a victory pose. Yes, I'm finally healthy again! The High Priest's magic tools certainly are incredible, Monica mused. I'm glad to see you smiling again, Lady Rosemine, Nicola exclaimed, now wearing a relieved smile herself. They had evidently realized that the smile I worked so hard to force while they were bathing me was completely fake. Sorry for worrying you two. With that, I went to exit the hidden room on my own 2 feet. Never had I thought that simply being able to move my body would feel so good. Wait, did you get your rest of your clothes on? I hope so. Reveling in the glory of my new health, I skipped to the door and threw it open. I can move on my own again thanks to you, Ferdinand. I thank you ever so much. Fran and my other attendants looked at me with shock, then broke into relieved smiles. Ferdinand, meanwhile, merely nodded as though it had been obvious that the magic tools would work. Rosemine, you are to leave for the castle 3 days from now. Once there, you will be educated on what you need to know for the Royal Academy, and then it will immediately be time for winter socializing. The Royal Academy? Do I really need to go there even in this state? Can't you just delay it for a year so I don't have to cram anything? I asked, grimacing at the very thought. There was no chance Ferdinand would show me any mercy. He would expect results appropriate for the Archduke's adopted daughter, despite the fact I was recovering from a coma and needed magic tools just to move. His brutal teaching regimen was not something I was looking forward to right now. No matter what happens, I'm not going to the Royal Academy. Ferdinand's crazy expectations will definitely kill me. You will not be considered a noble until you graduate from the Royal Academy, as each noble undergoes their coming-of-age ceremony and the graduation ceremony at the same time. If you delayed your attendance by 1 year, you would not be considered an adult in noble society even after turning 15. This will make it harder for you to marry, find work, or do anything as a noble. It would introduce a considerable weakness for others to exploit. Well, my noble life started with me pretending to be 1 year younger than I really am, and I already have a ton of weaknesses like being sickly, having been raised in the temple, and so on. I don't really think holding back on this for now will change much. Plus, delaying my coming-of-age ceremony means I get to spend an extra year in the temple, right? When it came to attending the Royal Academy, I didn't feel that there was any need to rush whatsoever. The longer I went before coming of age, the longer I could spend in the lower city. Ferdinand appeared to have fallen into thought. All children go to the Royal Academy upon turning 10, and it is my honest opinion that you will find things more peaceful there. If you stay here, expect to spend the winter enduring strange looks from nobles and countless questions about whether the child of an archduke can survive after having their schooling delayed a year. That may be true, but I have the dedication ritual and the Lord of Winter hunt to take care of, plus I'll be staying in the temple to recover, so I doubt I'll see any nobles all over the winter. Ferdinand gave a nod, but the contemplative look on his face remained. While I had managed to deflect his attack, he still intended to make me go to the Royal Academy. I prepared for his next move, determined to remain steadfast no matter what. Consider that if you delay your schooling by a year, you will end up in the same grade as Charlotte. You actually look younger than her due to having slept for such a long time. If you end up in the same grade as well, where would your status as an older sister go? What? Missing a year will put me in the same grade as Charlotte? Oh, that was a serious problem. My heart wavered, and as if sensing my weakness, Ferdinand allowed his lips to curve into a grin. Charlotte was devastated that she was responsible for you going into a coma, he said. If she ends up in the same grade as you, her dear older sister, as a consequence, she will surely regret her deeds each and every day you spend together in the Royal Academy. Do you truly wish to put her thoughts through such emotional turmoil? Oh, he got you! He got you right there! Right in the feels! Right where he knows it'll hurt the most! I had rushed out the window to save my cute little sister, not to cause her future hardships. The thought alone made my heart sink, and it annoyed me how much Ferdinand understood that. You will not have to cram as much as you did prior to Charlotte's baptism, and the magic tools allowing you to move will assist you greatly. You may have lost 2 years of your life, but you can still remain an older sister if she respects, if only you try. Fine, I'll do it. As Charlotte's big sister, I have to. Good. In that case, I will see you in the castle 3 days hence. If you wish to meet with the planting company before then, do so sooner rather than later. Ferdinand opened the door to the hidden room, signaling that our conversation was over. I had completely and utterly lost. The minutiae of noble politics didn't really matter to me, but as Charlotte's older sister, I absolutely needed to go to the Royal Academy. Lady Rosamund, may we give our reports on what happened while you were asleep? Fran asked. I looked up to see my attendants standing in a line before me. Fran, Zom, and Monica were grouped together since they had collectively managed my chambers, while Nicola stood alone to give a report on the kitchen, where she had predominantly worked over the past 2 years. Then there were Wilma and Rosina, who would give a report on the orphanage. It seemed that Wilma had at some point conquered her fears of entering the noble section of the temple, as she was confidently standing right next to Rosina. At the very end were Gil and Fritz ready to give reports on the workshop. Please do, I replied. No major incidents occurred within your chambers, Fran explained. Zom, Monica, and I spent each day working at the High Priest's chambers to assist him with his workload. During spring prayer and the Harvest Festival, Lady Charlotte and Lord Wolfried traveled across the Central District in your place. They struggled somewhat during the first year, but during the second they handled the divine instruments brilliantly and gave generous blessings to all. I see. I'll need to thank them later. Their visiting the temple before and after the ceremonies has also resulted in a change of attitude among the Blue Priests. More have begun to take their duties seriously to earn their favor, he continued. That motivation was definitely the result of greed, but I supposed it was better than nothing. What we were most worried about was the High Priest's use of potions. He is relying on them as much as he did previously, so we ask that you please encourage him to stop as you did before. He merely shrugs off our advice. I gave a nod, trying to ease the worry in Fran's eyes. The workload Ferdinand had endured was so immense that not even regular potion usage was enough for him to do it all by himself. So there was no doubt in my mind that warnings from his attendants wouldn't have even come close to getting him to cut back. I suppose I will need to help him with his work so he doesn't have to continue using those potions, I replied. Once Fran's report was concluded, Nicholas stepped forward with a wooden board in hand. Thanks to you, Lady Rosamund, I got to spend 2 years working in the kitchen as an assistant. I've learned to make all the recipes you left us, plus there were cooking competitions between Hugo and Lace that produced even more new ones. Cooking competitions? What the heck? Those sounded like so much fun! I'm looking forward to the new recipes, but who won? So far, they have won one each. I look forward to the tiebreaker then. Also, Hugo and Ella have asked to get married. Hugo wanted me to tell you as soon as you woke up. Come again? Ferdinand never mentioned that Ella was the person Hugo wanted to marry. It's apparently tradition for noble women to quit their work after getting married, but Ella wishes to remain a shelf. If possible, I would appreciate you handling this matter for her. It's nice that she wants to keep working even after getting married, but how will we handle their quarters? I'll speak to Ferdinand, but for now, let's arrange for them to get married next summer. Ah, Hugo is going to be so happy. I thank you ever so much. Nicola completed her report by mentioning that the recipe book had been completed, then moved aside for Wilma and Rosina to step forward. Here is our report on the orphanage, Wilma began. We received 3 new orphans during the 2 years while we were asleep. 2 were found abandoned at the gate, while the 3rd was born from a Grey Shrine maiden named Lily, who had previously served Brother Eggman. Wait, is the baby an orphan? What happened to Lily? I know Eggman. He was the villain who had wrecked my bookroom in the past. And now he impregnated one of his attendants and sent their child to the orphanage? Hold on a second. Is that normal here, or am I allowed to get mad about this? I was too taken aback to respond immediately, and in the end I decided to entrust the ethical debate to someone else rather than try and figure it out myself. Should I take that to mean she gave birth in the orphanage? No, as there was nobody there who knew how to serve as a midwife, we were unable to care for her ourselves. We discussed the matter with Thule and the planting company, then moved her to the monastery in Haas so that the people there could help. Ferdinand apparently told them to leave Lily alone and allow the baby to be born on its own. Wilma had been uneasy nonetheless, and so she had consulted Thule and Lutz, who naturally pointed out that this was definitely not the case. Good work, you two. There was about 20 women in the orphanage, but none had any experience helping with the birth, so they had moved Lily to the monastery with the Grey Shrine maidens at Benno's direction. Nora took the lead there, since she had assisted with the birth before, and with other women from Haas helping out as well, things proceeded smoothly without any major complications. It seemed that Benno had yelled at Wilma for her unwillingness to accompany them to Haas, despite her being responsible for the orphanage, so she was ultimately forced to go along as well. That must have been very hard for you, I murmured. Are you okay, Wilma? Getting shouted at by Benno was scary enough already, but with her fear of men, I can imagine that had been outright terrifying for Wilma. I couldn't see how it would have accomplished anything other than reinforcing her existing trauma. It certainly was difficult, yes, but it was a valuable experience, Wilma explained. The mother and child are now staying in the orphanage. We are using our experience with Dirk and taking turns to look after the baby. How is Dirk, by the way? Have you been draining his mana? Yes, once he shows signs of build-up, we immediately send Fran to inform the High Priest, who in turn responds at once. As a result, Dirk has had no problems whatsoever. Dirk was in a tough spot since mana build-up would put his very life in danger, so it was good to hear he was doing well. The musical training in the orphanage is going splendidly as well, Rosina added. We allowed them all to touch the harpsteel, though only those who expressed an interest were taught how to play. As far as I can tell, only one has the talent necessary to become a personal musician, but the fact that they do not enjoy practicing means they will most likely never make use of said talent. Nobles had to study music for their debut, but the orphans had no such obligation. My only goal here was to identify the children with both talent and the drive to learn. There would almost certainly be children who were talented but had no interest in music, and there was no point in focusing on those who weren't properly motivated. However, there is a child who seems to have a future as an artist. They love to draw, and whenever they have the time, they mimic Wilma's art on their own stone slate. I see. Feel free to buy as many replacement pens as you need. Understood. It seems that Rosina was taking her job of teaching the children in the orphanage very seriously, which comes as a huge relief. I had been worried she would outright refuse, since this kind of work wasn't normally expected of a musician. Now for the workshop, Gil said in his shockingly deep voice. He was so tall and looked so much like an adult now that I couldn't believe it. Well, he should be 12 now, right? 12, 13, somewhere around there? He summarized the events of the past 2 years for me. They had run out of manuscripts they could print, so they had decided to borrow a book from Thule. In return, she and Lutz were taught proper etiquette at the orphanage. I believe they now observe etiquette well enough to be presented to men nobles, Fritz said, having taught Lutz. Wilma nodded in agreement, having taught Thule. They have both shown much ambition and worked incredibly hard. They regularly visit the orphanage, and their help raising Dirk and assisting with Lily's birth proved crucial. I suppose I will need to thank them both as well, I replied. Gil suddenly looked up as though he had remembered something. Thule recommended we make books that teach etiquette, and we finished printing them last winter. They are selling well among the rich upper class, since they cover noble greetings. You should thank her for that as well. You know what? Thule might just be a real angel. 5 books in total had been released as products while I was asleep. The collection of night stories, the collection of mom stories I had given to Thule, a recipe book written by Nicola and illustrated by Wilma, and 2 books about manners that had been put together by my attendants at Thule's suggestion. There was also a manuscript given to us by Lady Elvira, but since we were given a strict deadline to print them, we only made as many as were needed. Lady Elvira requested ownership of all copies, even those with errors, so we no longer have any versions at all, Gil explained. His wavering eyes told me everything. Of course Elvira wouldn't allow any loose copies to be left laying around the temple. Were Ferdinand to catch even a glimpse of one, he would no doubt fly into a rage and put his all into completely obliterating the workshop. Mother, did you really want a book about him so badly you would risk everything? Yep. Yes, she would. Gil had a progress report on Haldensdale as well. The Gutenbergs had mobilized on a large scale to establish branches of the plant paper and printing guilds in the province. Or the plant paper and printing guilds in the province, whereupon they had negotiated the distribution of product and profits and such. They had then gone to the workshops Gieb Haldensdale had prepared to share our techniques with the workers. We brought the metal parts needed to make the printing presses for us from Ehrenfest, since Johann wasn't sure he could make them without his usual tools. We shared the schematics with the workers, but tools aside, they don't even have the technical skill to put the parts together. That doesn't surprise me, I replied. With Johann handling any precise orders one after another, his technical ability was only continuing to improve. At this point, he was basically on a whole other level from anyone else. They'll try making their own metal letter types over the winter, and they wish for us to check their quality come spring. Very well, I appreciate you having traveled so far for this, Gil. It was for the sake of spreading the printing industry, he responded, breaking into a grin that reminded me so much of the younger him that I couldn't help but smile as well. I understand well how hard you have all worked in my absence. Thank you. I would expect nothing less from my attendants, I said, praising everyone once their reports were done. With our business concluded, Freya put me to bed with several wooden boards. I received these from the High Priest today, Lady Rosamund. Please rest and spend your time reading them. He made it clear that you were not to overexert yourself whatsoever. But I need to write letters. Fear not, I will contact the Planted and Gilberta companies. You may rest now and leave the meeting arrangements to us. In 3 days' time you will be leaving for the castle, and from that point onward you are expected to cram until it is time to depart for the Royal Academy. I nodded, then leaned back on my bed and started looking over the boards. On them were long lists of everything I needed to know before entering the Royal Academy, sorted in order of priority. At the top were country history and geography, the ranking of duchies based on mana and economic power, the names and histories of the royal family, and the names and histories of the Archduke candidates attending the Royal Academy at the same time as me. As far as I was concerned, this was perfect. I bet there are going to be so many books for me to read. Wait. I need to practice. Dedication whirls. And Grandfather's going to put me through a physical training regiment? Am I going to die before I can even make it to the Royal Academy? Oh no, especially when Boniface is getting to you. Dear Lord Almighty, that's gonna be rough. Fran had organized my meeting straight away. It would be held tomorrow afternoon, so my morning schedule was the same as always. Now that I was awake, Daniel would come to the temple as soon as second bell rang to serve as my guard knight. His youthful air had vanished completely, such that he never came across like a full-grown adult. I initially assumed that the visible exhaustion on his face was due to his lost love, but it was actually because Bonifacius was working him to the bone during training. Lord Bonifacius has spent every day training the Archducal family's guard knights to ensure you will not be put at risk again. Both Angelica and Cornelius have gotten so much stronger they can hardly believe it. I see, that makes me look forward to going to the castle a little more. I practiced the Harpspiel with Rosina after breakfast, but I was so rusty I could barely move my fingers properly. I say that 3 days without practice will change one's sound, and you have spent 2 years asleep, so there's no avoiding a slight deterioration in your playing ability. I must say, though, you are getting back into the flow of things quite quickly. Perhaps it's because, from your perspective, the last time you played was only a few days ago. Am I good enough to avoid embarrassing myself at the Royal Academy, I wonder? Due to my time in the Dreve, I was still playing at the level one would expect of an 8-year-old, which surely wasn't ideal when I was going to a place packed with nobles who had practiced until they were 10. There is no need to worry, simply continue practicing and you will be fine. The study plan the High Priest arranged for you increased in difficulty quite rapidly, So once your fingers are moving properly again, you will not need to worry about embarrassing yourself. Even then, I could guess I would just barely reach a passable level. Or barely be reaching a passable level. It was hard to make up for lost time in skill-based things like this. But my only choice was to continue practicing to the best of my ability. At third bell, I went to help Ferdinand in his chambers. His attendants practically wept tears of joy when I arrived there with Fran and Zom, which went to show just how painful the workload had been for them. Please be aware that I will soon be going to the Royal Academy, so I will only be helping today and tomorrow, I warn them. Even just receiving fewer summons from the castle is more than welcome. We now have the strength to go on. Grr, Sylvester, how dare you exploit Ferdinand again? Yeah, you gotta get on to him about that. In any case, I did my best to blast through the map I was given, determined to lessen Ferdinand's workload as much as possible. When I was done, he gave me a nod with an exceedingly satisfied expression. Very good, he said, handing me a rejuvenation potion. Thank you ever so much. I accepted the potion, though I actually felt pretty conflicted about doing so, whether the taste was improved or not. That said, I knew Ferdinand had made it out of whatever kindness he possibly had in his heart. That's kind of rude. He does. He just very deep within there. And it's kind of warped, considering how nobles are and how Veronica treated him and who knows what else. So I needed to at least act grateful. After lunch, I went to look over the orphanage and the workshop, both to announce my recovery and praise everyone for their hard work. Gil and Daniel accompanied me, with Monica and Nicola returning to my orphanage director's chambers ahead of time to make the necessary preparations. The orphanage had changed in many ways. Several of the apprentices had come of age, and some of the kids who hadn't been any bigger than me were now full-fledged apprentices. As for the pre-baptism children, Dirk and 3 babies were crawling around. Delia had always looked pretty, but now she was a jaw-dropping beauty, while Dirk was a toddler without much of a baby face anymore. I guess Camille's about this big now? If they kept growing at this rate, Camille and Dirk would end up taller than me before long. That's scary. That thought alone filled me with intense, instinctive sense of dread. That's sad, too. When the babies you're taking care of will end up taller than you at some point. That's sad. Lady Rosemine, the planting company has arrived, Fran announced as I was sitting at my desk looking over the workshop balance sheet that I had received from Gil. Benno, Mark, and Lutz climbed up to where I was on the second floor. While he hadn't grown as much as Gil, Lutz was much taller now, reaching all the way to Fran's shoulders. He wore a sharp expression, and perhaps due to him having been forged in the fires of constant busyness, I sensed the aura of a capable working man radiating from him. After the standard tedious introductions, I went into my hidden room. Gil and Daniel followed as they usually did when I was dealing with the planting company, and no sooner had the door closed than I leaped straight into it. Of course, you got 2 years worth of hugs to get through, girl. Especially considering you're about to go to the Royal Academy and you won't get to see him at all. Yeah. Plus, you're so tall now! There was an audible thump as he caught me. Instead of my head reaching his shoulders like what it used to, it ended up buried somewhere between his chest and lower stomach. You are tall! You are short, girl! The 15-centimeter gap between us had evolved into something like 30 centimeters, and my mood plummeted in an instant. Benna walked over, patted my head as I clung to Lutz, and blinked a little in surprise. Rosemine, have you shrunk? No! I haven't gotten taller, but I haven't shrunk either, you meanie. It's not like I slept because I wanted to. I could feel the floodgates inside of me give way as the words left my mouth. Before I knew it, tears were streaming down my cheeks, and maybe because I wasn't usually permitted to show my emotions, there was just no stopping them. Yeah, I think you have a right to cry. Sorry about that. Has anyone else mentioned it, or have you just been holding back those tears for a while now, Benno asked, which really made me think. Ferdinand told me to not get emotional. I've got even more mana now, so I can't risk losing control. I guess I really did want to cry after all, though. Isn't losing control of your mana really damn serious? It's okay, really. I've got 4 physical enhancement magic tools on my limbs. Alright, cry as much as you want, then. This is probably the only place you can do that, huh? Benno said, ruffling my hair before stepping away. Lutz gave a small smile and patted me on the head. Yep, cry all you want. Honestly, I'm glad to see you haven't changed much. I was talking to Tuli the other day about what it'd be like if you suddenly ended up a totally new person. What? Knowing that I could freely let out my emotions at last caused all the tension to drain from my body. I clung to Lutz and cried so hard that I even surprised myself, until eventually it was all out of my system. I felt a wave of relief, like all the fear and frustration that had built up inside of me had flowed out along with the tears. I looked up and saw Lutz's face, which was higher up than I remembered it being. Well, duh, girl, you just got taller! It was nice to see that his jade eyes were the same as ever, at least. Well, your eyes don't really change too much. Lutz, you feel a lot different than you used to. You've gotten all hard and muscly now. Both you and Gil have grown up way too much. Plus, you both look... Oh, god damn, Cole! What the fuck? You got 5 years till you come of age. How tall is she gonna get? Not much, I guess. Plus, you both look so manly. And Gil sounds like an entirely different person. Not you, though, Benno. You just look old. Jab at you, Benno. Wait, how old was he at the time? Isn't he going to be like almost 40 at this point? Jesus Christ. God, what was that, you little brat? I giggled and stuck out my tongue while using Lutz as a shield, but Benno still managed to grind a fist against my head with a grimace. God, I cried out, it hurts, it hurts. It feels like a decent enough punishment. It'd do you good to remember how hard we worked for you. But we're here to talk about exactly that, aren't we? Then quit screwing around and pay attention. I'll tell you everything that's going on. I nodded and sat down on Liz's lap. What the fuck, dude? Sit down in a chair, not his lap. Benno sat down across from me, then shot me a cold glare. Are you being serious, he asked. Let me have this. I haven't yet recovered from my Lutz deficiency. Plus, I need to cram 2 years' worth of studies in before going to a school full of nobles for a while, so I need to charge up now while I still can. Right. Do what you want. I'll just go ahead and give my report. Benno brought me up to date on the progress and status of the printing industry in Haldensale. Unlike in Ilgner, when we had only needed to teach them how to make paper, we had apparently needed to teach the locals how to make metal letter types and manage other crucial aspects of the printing industry. One season ultimately hadn't been enough, so their plan was to visit the province again next spring to check up on everything. There were also several other things that had been stalled since they required my approval. Right, we'll shoot over there next spring on my high beast, then blast through all the work that needs to be done, I said. Blast through it, huh? Couldn't ask for anything more. For now, though, I'm just glad you finally woke up. We really need you to rein in your people. I can't take any more meetings where a bunch of archnobles stare me down while the high priest gives me a sympathetic look. I quickly averted my gaze. It wasn't hard to imagine Benno in that situation, surrounded by Haldensale nobles, questioning whether printing would really bring them a profit, while Elvira stood eagerly at their side, driven to establish a workshop by her own ulterior motives. Well, what can I say? My sympathies. Benno went on to explain that they had struggled with an ultra-express order from Elvira that she had needed done in time for winter socializing. When he was finished, I handed Liz a letter from my family. What should I do with this, he asked. I've been living in the planting company since last summer, and Tully's living in the Gilberta company now. What? Oh, right, she's Laharl too. Back when Tully had turned 10, the planting and Gilberta companies were in the midst of relocating after becoming two separate businesses, so she hadn't been able to move into the store immediately. Benno's group were now staying on the second floor of the planting company, while Karina and Otto had moved from the third to the second floor of the Gilberta company. Only once this was all done was a room prepared for Tully. You can deliver it straight to her house, Benno chimed in. Just hold on to it for now, Lutz. Understood, Master Benno. With that settled, I explained that we wouldn't be able to meet for a while, since I was going to the Royal Academy from the winter onward. Benno asked me to speak to the nobility about the printing industry in Haldensale, after which my meeting with the planting company came to an end. Gil crouched down. I'll give you a head pat for having worked so hard, I said. His eyes widened in surprise as I reached out my hand. Then he rolled his mind. I'm too old for that now. What? Oh, okay, right. Sorry. Oh. He don't want the head pats no more. That sucks. Seriously, I would think he would at least like a hug or something. She can't even give him a hug. She couldn't even give him a head pat out there. Gil wore such an uncomfortable expression as he turned me down that I reflexively pulled back my hand. While he had certainly grown taller, I thought he was the same person on the inside, but only then did I remember he was he's 14! Generally Christ! He was 12! I thought he was 10! Wait, he would have been 10 when he became her attendant. There's no way it's been 2 years! She joined when she got her baptism when she was 7. Am I getting something wrong here? I'm confused. Right in the middle of puberty. The Gil I knew who loved head pats is gone forever. I feel kind of sad now. After 2 whole years, I guess it only makes sense that he would change on the inside too. But as I slumped over sadly, Gil knelt down and lowered his head in front of me. Actually, I just remembered that I do want head pats. Please go ahead. I knew that he was just saying it for my sake, but I didn't want to rebuff his kindness. I reached out for his grown-up head and gently stroked his hair, which felt a little coarser than I remembered it being. This will probably be the last time I ever get to praise him like this. You worked really hard over the past 2 years, Gil. I can't describe how happy I was to wake up and see 5 new books right next to me. Thank you. Keep up the good work. Right. Oh, sucks. I know he was gonna grow up and everything, but I still figured that would be the one thing that didn't change was him wanting praise like that. Especially since she had been asleep for 2 years. That sucks. Anyway, I'll get to work on everything and I will see you guys in the next one.